Lieutenant Varajin sat in the briefing room of the Keltharian military station, staring at the holographic display in front of her. The blue light flickered across her angular features as she read the mission details for the third time. Her long fingers gripped the edge of the table, and her breathing grew shallow. A human. They were pairing her with a human. For 300 cycles, the Keltharians had maintained their reputation as the finest warriors in the Galactic Coalition. Their psychic abilities allowed them to sense danger before it arrived. Their combat techniques had been refined over millennia. They were disciplined, calculated, and proud of their heritage. Humans were none of these things. Varajin had heard the stories in the military academies. Humans were newcomers to the galactic stage. Barely 200 years since first contact. They were loud, emotional, and disturbingly unpredictable. They treated war like some kind of game. They laughed at things that should terrify them. They formed emotional bonds with their equipment, their vehicles, and even their weapons. It was primitive. It was unsettling. "This is a mistake," Varajin said to Commander Thelazar, her superior officer. "I request a transfer to another team." The commander, an older Keltharian with silver markings along his temples, shook his head slowly. "Request denied, Lieutenant. The decision comes from the Council itself. The Void Swarm threatens all species equally. This war requires cooperation between all coalition races." "But why a human?" Varajin pressed. "The Mindari are telepathic like us. The Zorkai are proven warriors. Even the Talvesh would be preferable." "The humans have something we need," Thelazar replied. "They have experience with impossible situations. They have a quality that our analysts cannot quite define, but which has won them battles they should have lost." He paused. "They call it stubbornness. We might call it the refusal to accept defeat." Varajin submitted her transfer request 2 more times over the next 2 days. Both were denied. On the morning of the mission, she stood on the landing platform and watched the human transport ship descend. It was smaller than Keltharian vessels, built with harder angles and thicker armor. It looked aggressive, like everything else about humans. The cargo ramp lowered with a hiss of hydraulics. Varajin straightened her posture and prepared herself for the worst. Sergeant Marcus Chen walked down the ramp carrying a large equipment bag over one shoulder. He was shorter than Varajin by half a head, with dark hair cut close to his scalp and several visible scars on his hands and neck. His armor was scratched and dented, clearly used in many battles. He wore a casual expression that seemed completely inappropriate for a war zone. "Lieutenant Varajin?" Marcus asked, extending his hand in the human greeting gesture. "Marcus Chen, good to meet you." Varajin looked at his hand for a moment, before accepting it briefly. His grip was firm but not aggressive. "Sergeant Chen, I trust you received the mission briefing." "Yeah, read it on the way over," Marcus said, dropping his bag and stretching his arms. "Infiltrate a Void Swarm hive ship, grab some intel about a superweapon. Get out before the fleet shows up. Sounds fun." "Fun?" He said it would be fun. Varajin felt her initial assessment was correct. This human did not understand the gravity of their situation. "The survival probability for this mission is 23%, she said coldly. "Does that sound fun to you?" Marcus looked at her with those strange human eyes, brown and warm. "Lieutenant, if I only did missions with good odds, I'd still be on Earth. But somebody's got to do the hard jobs, right?" He smiled. "Besides, 23% means we've got a chance. I've worked with worse." Before Varajin could respond, their commanding officer approached for the final briefing. They gathered around a holographic display showing the massive organic structure of the Void Swarm hive ship. It looked like a dark moon, covered in twisted spires and pulsing passages. "Your insertion window is narrow," the commander explained. "The fleet will arrive in exactly 72 hours. You must retrieve the intelligence data and reach the extraction point before then. If you are still inside when the bombardment begins, there will be no rescue." Marcus nodded, studying the display. Varajin noticed his casual demeanor had disappeared. He was focused now, asking questions about patrol patterns, structural weaknesses, and backup extraction points. Maybe he was not completely foolish. "Your stealth ship is prepared," the commander continued. "It will get you close to the hive ship undetected. Once inside, you will rely on your combined skills. Lieutenant Varajin's psychic abilities will help you avoid patrols. Sergeant Chen's combat experience will handle any direct encounters." "What about communications?" Marcus asked. "Limited. The Void Swarm's organic technology interferes with most transmissions. You will be essentially alone once you enter the hive." Varajin felt a cold weight settle in her chest. Alone, deep in enemy territory, with a human she had just met. This was her nightmare. They walked to the stealth ship together, carrying their equipment. Marcus talked as they walked, his voice easy and relaxed. He mentioned his family, a place called California, something about planning to adopt a dog when the war ended. Varajin did not understand why he shared these personal details with a stranger. "You talk too much," she said finally. Marcus laughed. "Yeah, I've been told that before. Helps me stay calm." "You don't have to respond if you don't want to." They reached the ship. It was small, designed for 2 passengers and minimal equipment. They would be very close together for the next several days. Varajin climbed aboard and began the pre-flight checks. Marcus secured their equipment and settled into the co-pilot seat. As the ship powered up, she glanced at him once more. He was checking his weapons with practiced efficiency. His hands moved with confidence. Despite his casual attitude, he was clearly experienced. "Sergeant Chen," she said, "when we are inside the hive ship, follow my lead. My people have been warriors for thousands of years." Marcus looked at her and nodded. "Understood, Lieutenant. And if things go bad, follow mine. My people have been surviving impossible situations since we climbed out of the caves." The ship lifted off, carrying them toward the darkness. Varajin did not pray to the Keltharian ancestral spirits. But as their ship accelerated toward the Void Swarm hive ship, she found herself hoping that the human beside her was more capable than he appeared. Their survival might depend on it. The stealth ship glided through the void of space like a shadow. Varajin kept her hands steady on the controls while Marcus monitored the sensor displays. The Void Swarm hive ship grew larger in the viewport with each passing minute. It looked like a massive creature sleeping in the darkness, its surface covered with organic ridges and pulsing with a sickly green light. "We are approaching the outer detection range," Varajin said quietly. "Reducing power to minimum levels." Marcus nodded and began checking his equipment one final time. His rifle, his sidearm, his combat knife, and several devices that Varajin did not recognize. Everything human-made. Everything looking primitive compared to Keltharian energy weapons. 5 minutes to insertion point," she announced. The ship trembled slightly as they entered the gravitational field of the hive ship. Varajin guided them toward a dark canyon between 2 massive organic structures. According to their intelligence, this area had minimal patrol activity. Then everything went wrong. Warning lights flashed across the console. A harsh alarm filled the cabin. Varajin's psychic senses screamed danger a split second before the sensor confirmed it. "We have been detected," she shouted. 3 swarm interceptors closing fast." Marcus gripped his seat as Varajin threw the ship into evasive maneuvers. The small vessel twisted and rolled, but the swarm ships were faster. Energy blasts streaked past them, and one struck their rear shield. "Shields at 40%, Marcus called out, reading the display. "We cannot take many more hits." Varajin made a quick decision. She aimed the ship directly at the hive surface, accelerating toward a large opening that looked like a launch bay. "We are going in hard! Brace yourself!" The swarm interceptors followed them into the opening, firing continuously. Another blast hit their ship, and systems began failing. Varajin struggled with the controls as they plunged into the organic tunnel. The walls were too close, the space too narrow. "Varajin," Marcus warned. She saw it too late. A massive support structure loomed in their path. She tried to turn, but the damaged controls did not respond fast enough. The ship clipped the structure and began spinning. They crashed into the tunnel floor, skidding across the rough organic surface before finally stopping. Silence filled the cabin except for the hiss of escaping air and the crackle of damaged circuits. Varajin tried to move and gasped in pain. Her left leg was trapped under a collapsed section of the console. Blood ran down her shin from a deep cut. The pain was intense, sharper than anything she had experienced in training. "Don't move," Marcus said suddenly beside her. His hands moved quickly, efficiently. He pulled the metal panel away from her leg with surprising strength. "Let me see." Varajin watched as the human examined her injury. His touch was gentle despite his scarred hands. He pulled out a medical kit from his vest and began cleaning the wound. She expected him to suggest she stay behind. She expected him to calculate that she would slow them down. "Can you feel your toes?" Marcus asked. "Yes," she replied through gritted teeth. "Good. No nerve damage then." He applied something from a small tube, and the pain immediately decreased. "This will help with the pain and prevent infection. Human combat medicine works on most carbon-based species." He worked quickly, wrapping her leg with a strong bandage. Then he looked around the wrecked cabin and found a piece of metal support beam. Using his knife and some straps from the emergency kit, he fashioned a brace for her leg. "This will support your weight," he explained, helping her stand. "It is not perfect, but it should work." Varajin tested the brace. The pain was still there, but manageable. She could walk, though not quickly. She looked at Marcus, expecting to see frustration or concern about her reduced capability. Instead, he was gathering their equipment and checking his weapons. "Can you walk?" he asked simply. "Because we are not leaving anyone behind. That is not how humans operate." Something shifted in Varajin's chest. "Not leaving anyone behind." The words were simple, but the meaning was profound. "I can walk," she confirmed. They exited the crashed ship into the dark interior of the hive. The walls were made of something that looked like hardened resin, organic and alive. Strange sounds echoed through the passages. The air smelled of decay and something chemical that made Varajin's nose wrinkle. Marcus pulled out a small device and marked their position. "We need to move. Those interceptors will report our crash. Swarm drones will be here soon." They moved through the corridors carefully. Marcus took the lead, checking each corner before proceeding. He moved with purpose, but not recklessness. Every few minutes, he would glance back to check on Varajin's position. When she fell behind because of her injured leg, he slowed his pace without comment. Varajin used her psychic abilities to sense approaching danger. She could feel the alien minds of the swarm creatures moving through the hive around them. Most were distant, but some were getting closer. "Stop," she whispered. 3 drones approaching from the left passage. Marcus immediately moved to cover, his rifle ready. Varajin positioned herself behind a ridge in the wall. They waited in silence as the insect-like drones skittered past their hiding spot, their multiple legs clicking against the floor. When the drones were gone, they continued. The deeper they went into the hive, the more Varajin began to notice things about her human partner. He was not charging forward blindly. He was methodical, marking their path so they could find their way back. He conserved his ammunition, only taking shots he knew would hit. He constantly watched their surroundings, always aware of threats. Between encounters, Marcus talked quietly. He told her about his home, about Earth's oceans and mountains. He mentioned his sister, who was an engineer. He talked about a dog shelter near his base and how he planned to adopt a rescue animal when he returned. Why do you share these things? Varajin asked during a rest period. Marcus checked his ammunition while he answered. Because it reminds me why I am fighting, and maybe because if something happens to me, at least someone will know I existed beyond just being a soldier. Varajin did not know how to respond to that. Keltharians did not discuss such personal matters with near strangers. They heard sounds ahead. Lots of movement, lots of creatures. Marcus held up his fist in a stopping gesture. They crept forward and looked down into a massive chamber. What they saw made Varajin's blood turn cold. Hundreds of swarm creatures filled the chamber, working on something enormous. It was a weapon, clearly, but unlike anything in the Coalition database, the design was sophisticated and terrible. We need to get closer, Marcus whispered. We need detailed scans of that thing. That is suicide, Varajin replied. There are too many of them. Marcus looked at her with those steady brown eyes. Probably, but that thing down there could destroy entire worlds. We did not come all this way to turn back now. He was right, and Varajin knew it. Despite the fear rising in her chest, despite her injured leg, despite the impossible odds, they had a mission to complete. Together, then, she said. Marcus smiled slightly. Together. They began moving down toward the chamber, two warriors from different worlds, united by purpose. Behind them, the sounds of pursuing swarm drones grew louder. The real battle was about to begin. Marcus and Varajin moved along the upper ledge of the massive chamber, staying low and quiet. Below them, hundreds of swarm workers continued their construction. The weapon dominated the center of the space, towering 3 stories high and covered with strange organic technology that pulsed with purple light. Varajin pulled out her scanning device and aimed it at the weapon. Data began flowing across the small screen. Her eyes widened as she read the information. Marcus, she whispered urgently, this is worse than we thought. He moved closer to see the display. What is it? It is not just a weapon, it is a biological agent. Her voice shook slightly. According to these readings, it targets psychic abilities specifically. The Keltharians, the Mindari, the Cylon, all telepathic species would be vulnerable. Marcus understood immediately. A virus? Yes, one that attacks the neural pathways that allow psychic abilities. It would not just disable our powers. It would kill us. Varajin felt the weight of her entire civilization pressing down on her shoulders. Billions of lives across multiple species. She continued scanning, gathering every piece of data she could. The device recorded the weapon's structure, its energy signature, everything that Coalition scientists would need to develop a defense. Her hands trembled as she worked. How long until the scan is complete? Marcus asked, watching the chamber below. 3 more minutes. Those 3 minutes felt like hours. Varajin forced herself to remain calm, to focus on the task. But her mind raced with terrible images of her homeworld, her people, all falling to this invisible killer. The scanning device beeped softly. Complete. We have it, Varajin said. We must get this data to the fleet. They began moving back the way they came. But Varajin's psychic senses suddenly flared with warning. Something is coming. Something big. A roar echoed through the chamber. Varajin turned and saw a creature emerging from a side tunnel. It was massive, easily twice the size of a normal swarm drone, with armored plating covering its body and multiple razor-sharp limbs. A hunter-killer, designed to eliminate intruders. "Run!" Marcus shouted. They ran through the organic corridors as fast as Varajin's injured leg would allow. The hunter-killer pursued them, its heavy footsteps shaking the floor. It was faster than them, closing the distance with each second. Marcus stopped suddenly and turned to face the creature. "Keep going. Get to the extraction point." "What?" "No!" Varajin protested. That data has to reach the fleet, Marcus said firmly. Go now. I will lead it away. Before Varajin could argue, Marcus opened fire on the hunter-killer and ran down a side passage. The creature roared and followed him, drawn by the gunfire and movement. Varajin stood frozen for a moment. Every logical calculation told her to continue to the extraction point. The mission was more important than any individual. That was what she had been taught her entire life. But then she felt something through her psychic abilities. She felt Marcus's emotions as he ran through the dark corridors with the monster chasing him. He was terrified. Humans felt fear just like any other species. But beneath that fear was something else, something burning and bright. It was determination. It was the absolute conviction that she would survive, that the data would reach the fleet, that his sacrifice would mean something. No Keltharian warrior had ever sacrificed themselves for her. No one had ever considered her life more valuable than their own. Varajin made her choice. She limped quickly to a structural support column and examined it with her psychic senses. The organic material was strong but had stress points. She placed her hands against it and focused all her remaining psychic energy into one powerful burst. The column cracked and began to collapse. The entire section of corridor groaned and started coming down. Varajin ran as fast as her injured leg allowed, feeling the structure falling behind her. Through the chaos, she heard Marcus's voice shouting her name. The collapse created a barrier between the hunter-killer and its prey. Varajin found Marcus in the dust and debris, breathing hard and staring at her with surprise. "What did you do?" he asked. "You were supposed to get to safety. And leave you to die alone? That is not how Keltharians operate either," Varajin replied, echoing his earlier words back to him. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Marcus smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "We are a terrible team, both of us willing to die for the other. Or maybe we are the best team," Varajin said quietly. The sounds of the enraged hunter-killer trying to dig through the rubble reminded them they were not safe yet. They moved quickly through the maze of corridors, working together. Varajin used her psychic senses to detect patrols and find the safest paths. Marcus used his combat experience to navigate the dangerous terrain and handle any drones that got too close. They fought several times. Varajin watched Marcus in combat and began to understand what human fighting really was. It was not mindless aggression. It was adaptation. Every piece of environment became a weapon. Every enemy weakness was exploited. When his rifle ran low on ammunition, he switched to his sidearm. When that was depleted, he used his knife. When that was not enough, he used his hands and whatever he could grab. And through it all, he made sure Varajin was protected. He positioned himself between her and the greatest threats. He created opportunities for her to use her psychic abilities effectively. Varajin found herself adapting too. She learned to fight like a human, improvising and taking risks she would never have considered before. She used her psychic powers in new ways, collapsing passages to trap enemies and sensing weak points in the hive's structure. They became synchronized, anticipating each other's moves without needing to speak. When Marcus went left, Varajin instinctively covered right. When she sensed danger from above, he was already aiming upward. Hours passed as they fought their way deeper into the hive, searching for an alternate extraction point. They were both exhausted, both wounded, both running on determination alone. During a brief rest in a hidden alcove, Marcus shared his water ration with her. "You know," he said quietly, "I was nervous about working with a Keltharian. Everyone said your people thought humans were primitive." "I did think that," Varajin admitted. "I was wrong." "Yeah?" "You are not primitive. You are survivors. You adapt to anything. You never give up. Even when logic says you should. She paused. And you are loyal to those who fight beside you. These are not primitive qualities. These are valuable ones. Marcus nodded slowly. And I thought Keltharians were cold and distant. But you came back for me. You risked everything to save someone you barely knew. You did the same for me first, Varajin pointed out. I guess we are both full of surprises. They heard sounds approaching. More drones, searching for them. Varajin checked the scanning device. The data was secure, but they were still deep in enemy territory with no clear way out. We need a ship, Marcus said, thinking aloud. The extraction point is compromised, and we cannot walk out of here. Varajin extended her psychic senses, searching through the hive. She felt the alien minds of thousands of swarm creatures. And then she felt something else, something mechanical but with organic components. There is a hangar, she said. Not far from here. I sense ships. Marcus stood and helped her to her feet. Then that is where we go. We steal a ship and fly out of here. That is insane. Probably, Marcus agreed. But do you have a better idea? Varajin thought about it for only a moment. They were already deep behind enemy lines, already injured and exhausted, already being hunted. What was one more impossible task? No, she said. I do not have a better idea. Let us steal a ship. They moved toward the hangar together, two warriors from different worlds who had learned to trust each other completely. Whatever came next, they would face it as partners. The bond between them was no longer just professional, it was something deeper. Forged in combat and sacrifice, they were brothers and sisters in arms now, and that meant everything. The hangar was massive, carved from the living tissue of the hive ship itself. Dozens of swarm vessels sat in organic docking cradles, their dark hulls glistening under the dim bioluminescent light. Varajin and Marcus crouched behind a ridge overlooking the space, studying the layout. There, Marcus pointed to a smaller vessel near the far wall. That one looks fast. Probably a scout ship. Varajin extended her psychic senses across the hangar. She felt the simple minds of worker drones performing maintenance. She felt patrol guards stationed at the main entrance. And she felt something else, something that made her blood run cold. Marcus, there is a problem. Just one? He asked with dark humor. That ship is guarded by a commander. Marcus tensed. Swarm commanders were elite creatures, far more intelligent and dangerous than regular drones. Intelligence reports said they had killed entire coalition strike teams. They were fast, strong, and nearly impossible to kill. Can we go around it? Marcus asked. Varajin scanned the other ships. All the functional vessels are in that section. The others are damaged or undergoing repairs. They had 12 hours before the fleet arrived. 12 hours to get off this hive ship or die in the bombardment. They needed that ship. How many guards total? Marcus asked, already planning. 17 drones, the commander, and workers who could become hostile if alerted. Marcus checked his remaining ammunition. He had 2 magazines for his rifle, 1 for his sidearm, 3 grenades, and his knife. Not nearly enough for a direct assault. We need a distraction, he said. Something big enough to draw most of them away. Varajin thought for a moment, then looked at the damaged ships. I could use my psychic abilities to overload one of those power cores. It would create an explosion. Can you do that from here? Yes, but it will drain most of my remaining energy. I will be weak afterward. Marcus met her eyes. We do this together, remember? I will handle the physical fighting. You focus on getting us that ship. They moved carefully along the ridge until they were closer to the damaged vessels. Varajin placed her hands against the organic floor and focused her mind. She reached out with her psychic power, searching for the energy signature of a damaged power core. There. She found one, unstable and leaking radiation. She began pushing energy into it, forcing the containment to fail faster. Sweat formed on her forehead from the effort. 30 seconds, she whispered. Marcus readied his rifle and positioned himself for a clear shot at the hangar entrance. The power core exploded with a brilliant flash and a deafening roar. Fire and debris scattered across one section of the hangar. Alarms began blaring throughout the hive. The drones immediately responded, rushing toward the explosion to assess the damage. "Now!" Marcus shouted. They ran toward the scout ship. Varadjin's leg screamed with pain, but she pushed through it. Most of the guards had left their positions, but 3 drones remained near the ship, along with the commander. Marcus opened fire, his shots precise and controlled. 2 drones fell immediately. The third turned toward them. But Varadjin used her psychic power to slam it against the wall. The effort made her dizzy, but the drone stayed down. The commander roared and charged toward them. It was huge, easily 8 feet tall, with 4 arms ending in blade-like claws. Its armored hide was scarred from countless battles. Marcus threw a grenade at the creature's feet. The explosion knocked it back, but did not seriously harm it. The commander recovered quickly and came at them even faster. "Get to the ship," Marcus ordered, moving to intercept the commander. "Not without you!" Varadjin shouted back. The commander swung its bladed arm at Marcus. He rolled under the strike and fired his rifle at point-blank range into the creature's midsection. The shots barely penetrated its armor. The commander backhanded Marcus, sending him flying across the hangar floor. Varadjin felt rage surge through her. She gathered what remained of her psychic energy and unleashed it at the commander, targeting its mind. The creature stumbled, confused and disoriented. It gave Marcus the seconds he needed to recover and charge back into the fight. They attacked together. Marcus moved with speed and precision, targeting joints and weak points in the armor. Varadjin used her abilities to create openings, disrupting the commander's balance and coordination. They moved as one unit, perfectly synchronized. When the commander focused on Marcus, Varadjin struck with psychic force. When it turned toward her, Marcus attacked from behind. They were relentless, neither giving the creature a moment to recover. Marcus drove his combat knife into a gap in the commander's neck armor. At the same moment, Varadjin released one final psychic blast directly into its brain. The commander let out a gurgling roar and collapsed. They stood over the fallen creature, both breathing hard and covered in wounds. More drones were returning from investigating the explosion. "Ship, now!" Marcus said. They ran to the scout vessel. The organic door opened at Varadjin's psychic touch. Inside, the controls were alien but intuitive. Varadjin slid into the pilot position while Marcus secured their equipment and sealed the door. "Can you fly this thing?" Marcus asked. "I am about to find out," Varadjin replied, placing her hands on the neural interface controls. The ship came alive under her touch. Its systems responded to her psychic commands. She felt the vessel's desire to fly, its purpose ingrained in its very structure. Drones swarmed around them, climbing on the hull and trying to tear through the armor. Varadjin lifted the ship off its cradle, smashing several drones against the hangar ceiling. She aimed toward the massive organic doors that led to space. "They are closing the doors," Marcus warned. The enormous doors were indeed sliding shut. They had perhaps 20 seconds before the gap was too small. Varadjin pushed the ship to maximum acceleration. The scout vessel shot forward like a missile. Drones fell away from the hull. Warning alarms blared as they approached the closing doors at incredible speed. "We are not going to make it," Varadjin said. "Yes, we are," Marcus shouted back. "Push harder!" Varadjin combined the ship's mechanical engines with a burst of psychic force, propelling them forward even faster. The walls of the hangar blurred past them. The doors continued closing. They shot through the gap with less than a meter to spare on each side. The ship's shields scraped against the closing doors, throwing sparks and tearing away a small piece of the hull. Then they were out, flying free in open space. Behind them, the hive ship came alive with angry energy. Dozens of interceptors launched in pursuit. Weapons platforms tracked their movement. "We have company," Marcus said, monitoring the sensors. Enemy fire streaked through space around them. Varajin threw the ship into evasive maneuvers, her psychic connection with the vessel allowing her to react faster than normal pilots could. Marcus worked the communications system, broadcasting on all Coalition frequencies. "This is Sergeant Marcus Chen and Lieutenant Varajin, broadcasting critical intelligence on swarm super weapon. Repeat, we have critical intelligence." An energy blast struck their rear shield. Alarms blared. The shield was failing. "Come on," Marcus muttered, continuing to broadcast. "Where is that fleet?" Another hit. Then another. The ship shuddered and began losing power. Then space itself seemed to tear open. Dozens of Coalition warships dropped out of hyperspace, their weapons already charging. The cavalry had arrived. The Coalition fleet opened fire on the swarm interceptors. Within seconds, the pursuing ships were destroyed. A tractor beam locked onto the scout vessel and pulled it toward the flagship. Varajin finally allowed herself to relax. Her hands were shaking. Her psychic energy was completely depleted. But they had done it. Against all odds, they had survived. Marcus leaned back in his seat and started laughing. Not mockery or madness, but genuine relief and joy. We actually did it. We actually stole a swarm ship and escaped. Varajin found herself laughing too, something she had not done in years. "We are both insane." "Probably," Marcus agreed. The scout ship was pulled into the flagship's hangar. As the doors sealed behind them, Varajin saw medical teams rushing forward. She tried to stand, but her injured leg finally gave out. Marcus caught her before she fell. "Easy. We made it. You can rest now." "Not yet," Varajin said, holding up the scanning device containing the weapon data. "This goes to command first." Marcus nodded with respect. "Together, then. We deliver it together." They limped out of the ship side by side, supporting each other. Two warriors from different worlds who had accomplished the impossible. The battle was over. But their story was just beginning. The medical bay of the Coalition flagship was sterile and bright, completely different from the dark organic corridors of the swarm hive ship. Varajin lay on a medical bed while doctors worked on her injured leg. Marcus sat in the bed next to hers, his ribs being wrapped after the medics discovered 3 were cracked from the commander's attack. "You should have mentioned the broken ribs earlier," Varajin said to him. Marcus shrugged carefully. "We had more important things to worry about. Besides, they still worked well enough." A Keltharian doctor approached Varajin with a disapproving expression. "Lieutenant, your leg injury is severe. You should have been evacuated immediately after the crash. Instead, you ran, climbed, and fought on it for hours. The damage is considerable." "Will I walk again?" Varajin asked directly. "Yes, but you will need extensive recovery time, at least 6 weeks before you return to active duty." Varajin nodded. 6 weeks was better than never. She glanced at Marcus, who was being given similar news about his ribs and various other injuries. An officer entered the medical bay, a high-ranking Mindari commander with silver insignia. "Sergeant Chen, Lieutenant Varajin, I am Commander Zelthos. On behalf of the Coalition, I must thank you both. The intelligence you retrieved is invaluable." "Did the scientists find a defense?" Varajin asked immediately. "They are working on it now. The data you gathered was complete and detailed. Our best estimates suggest we can develop a counteragent within 3 months. You have saved billions of lives across multiple species." Varajin felt the weight she had been carrying finally lift from her shoulders. The mission was truly complete. Commander Zelthos continued, "Your actions have been noted at the highest levels. Both of you are being recommended for the Star of Valor, the Coalition's highest military honor." "Just doing our job, sir," Marcus said simply. The commander smiled slightly. "Few soldiers could have done what you two accomplished. The coordination between you was remarkable. Your report mentioned multiple instances of mutual sacrifice and perfect tactical synchronization. We learned to trust each other, Varajin said, looking at Marcus. That made all the difference. After the commander left, they rested in comfortable silence. Other patients in the medical bay whispered about the two warriors who had infiltrated a swarm hive ship and survived. The story was already spreading through the fleet. 3 days later, they were both released from medical care with strict orders to rest. They walked together through the flagship's corridors, moving slowly because of their injuries. Soldiers from various species stopped to salute them or offer words of thanks. "This is weird," Marcus said quietly. "I am not used to being famous." "Neither am I," Varajin admitted. "I prefer working in the shadows." They reached the observation deck, a large room with transparent walls showing the stars outside. Few people were there, giving them privacy. They stood together, looking out at the infinite darkness dotted with distant light. "What will you do when you recover?" Marcus asked. Varajin had been thinking about that question for days. Before this mission, her path had been clear. She would continue serving in the diplomatic corps, accepting whatever assignments came her way, maintaining the proud Keltharian tradition of duty without attachment. But something had changed inside her. She had learned that duty could include loyalty to individuals, not just causes. She had learned that strength came from unity, not just from ancient traditions. "I have been offered a position at the military academy," she said, "teaching tactical cooperation between species. They want me to share what we learned on this mission." "That sounds perfect for you," Marcus said with genuine warmth. "But I am going to decline the offer." Marcus looked at her with surprise. "Why?" Varajin turned to face him fully. "Because I am requesting a permanent partnership with you, Sergeant Chen. If you will have me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled that easy human smile she had come to recognize and appreciate. "You know I am just a regular soldier, right? Not some elite special forces operator. I fix things, I follow orders, and I try not to die." "You are loyal," Varajin said. "You are brave without being reckless. You adapt to any situation. You never leave anyone behind. These qualities are more valuable than any elite training." "The diplomatic corps might not approve," Marcus pointed out. "Cross-species permanent partnerships are rare. Then they can disapprove. I am making this choice for myself, not for them." Marcus extended his hand in that human gesture of agreement. "Partners, then. For whatever comes next." Varajin took his hand firmly. "Partners." Word of their decision spread quickly through the coalition military. For some, it was controversial. Keltharians and humans had very different military traditions. Many questioned whether such a partnership could work long-term, but others saw it as a symbol of what the coalition truly meant. Different species, different cultures, different ways of thinking, all united against common threats. 6 weeks later, fully recovered from their injuries, Varajin and Marcus received their medals in a ceremony attended by representatives from every coalition species. They stood at attention, while the Star of Valor was pinned to their uniforms. The Keltharian High Council sent a representative who spoke about honor, duty, and sacrifice. The human ambassador spoke about courage, friendship, and hope. Both speeches were formal and appropriate. But what mattered most to Varajin was the simple nod of respect Marcus gave her when their eyes met. They had been through something that ceremonies and speeches could never fully capture. After the ceremony, they were given their next assignment. A diplomatic mission to a neutral world, trying to convince them to join the coalition against the swarm threat. It required both military expertise and cultural sensitivity. "Sounds complicated," Marcus said, reading the mission brief. "Everything worth doing is complicated," Varajin replied. They prepared their equipment together, working with the practiced efficiency of a team that had been through fire. Other soldiers watched them with curiosity and respect. A young Keltharian soldier approached Varajin hesitantly. "Lieutenant, may I ask you something?" "Of course." "Is it true that humans laugh at danger? That they feel no fear?" Varajin thought about Marcus running through dark corridors with a hunter-killer chasing him. She remembered feeling his terror through her psychic senses, and also feeling his determination to push through that fear. "Humans feel fear just like we do," she said, "but they have learned something valuable. They have learned that courage is not the absence of fear. It is the choice to act despite fear. That is a lesson worth learning." The young soldier nodded thoughtfully and walked away. Marcus had overheard the conversation. "Nice speech. Did you rehearse that?" "No," Varajin said honestly. "I simply spoke the truth. You taught me that lesson." "We taught each other," Marcus corrected. "You showed me that strategy and planning matter just as much as determination. That psychic abilities are not mysterious magic but practical tools. That ancient traditions have wisdom worth preserving." They boarded their transport ship, ready for the next mission. As the ship lifted off from the flagship, Varajin looked back at the coalition fleet gathered in formation. Each ship represented a different species, different cultures, different ways of fighting. But they were all united by a common purpose, just like she and Marcus. "You know what is funny?" Marcus said as they accelerated toward hyperspace. "When I first got this assignment, I was nervous about working with a Keltharian. I thought you would be cold and impossible to connect with. And I thought you would be reckless and impossible to control," Varajin admitted. "We were both wrong. Yes, we were both very wrong." The transport ship jumped to hyperspace, carrying them toward their next mission. Varajin no longer feared being paired with a human. Instead, she was grateful for the soldier who had changed everything. Marcus had taught her that different did not mean inferior, that adaptation was a strength, not a weakness, that loyalty to individuals mattered just as much as loyalty to causes. And together, they had learned the most important lesson of all, that the strongest teams are built not on similarity, but on mutual respect, trust, and the willingness to protect each other at any cost. The galaxy was still at war. The Void Swarm still threatened countless worlds. There would be more missions, more dangers, more impossible odds. But whatever came next, they would face it together. And that made all the difference. The end.